art and science are very tightly linked in the sense that artists don't have to be bound by physical laws and, like I was saying, the creation of what you're given. The things I look at are small, so I can't really see them. Even with a microscope, I'm only seeing abstractions from that. So I have to think and imagine what might be happening in that process. And then you have to design experiments to test these ideas or questions. Exactly. So you're constantly looking beyond what you actually have available. So and they're also very technical. You use your hands a lot. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of letting go of sometimes what you think is this hypothesis you created and crafted so nicely. You don't want it to be like, not supported. It's just not going to work. So you have to find other ways of getting around it. So it is a very kind of cathartic process of letting go when you really want to just get to the answer. And so.
Dennis, it's great to have you in the studio again, man.
Oh, it's great to be here, Neil.
It's definitely a pleasure. So many things I wanted to ask you the last time you were here, and I couldn't ask you.
Oh, for sure. Let's go.
I didn't have time. But first off, just so people know a little more about you, you just want to run through some of your credentials?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of nanoscience. I actually started off as a biologist. I'm a trained geneticist. I did my graduate work at Johns Hopkins, postdoc at Duke, where I worked with fruit flies studying tumor suppressor genes. And actually, my graduate work was studying pattern formation, control of pattern formation that's in flies, but this is something that can extend to all life pretty much on Earth, all metazoan life.
Yeah.
And then started 22 years ago at UNCG in the biology department. And about 10 years ago, I was brought over to Nano School, where I've been was part-time and then now full-time for like the past 6-7 years. So
wow.
It's been awesome. Pretty crazy ride.
Yeah,
because incredible. I switched fields in the middle of that, and that was the crazy part.
Yeah. What got you into nanoscience or biology rather?
So I was a classics major as an undergrad. And so I was considering going to archaeology, and then, professors talk and they were telling me how difficult it was to get a job as an archaeologist, because there's a sort of a tiered system and you got to inherit sites, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I took a couple of years off where I was roaming the earth. I think I was in Corpus Christi, Texas, waiting tables. I was a fencing coach in New Jersey for a while. And so what do I really want to do? So I said, I'll go to grad school. And biology, I had biology courses as electives when I was a major. And I had genetics. And so I said, well, yeah, I'll just go into genetics. This is a really cool. And I was really fascinated by how a single cell, the gamete, will lead to the formation of an entire multicellular organism like us.
It's amazing.
This is totally cool. So I went into developmental genetics, and that's kind of how I got into that. Nanoscience I was intrigued by the fact that on fruit flies, for instance, there's nanomaterials everywhere. On their eyes, on their wings, on their feet.
Yeah, close-ups of flies, they don't even look like what we think of as biology. They look like they're little machines.
Exactly. Yeah. So the intention was to say, I can use this organism to study how natural systems make nanomaterials. And that became really complicated and much harder than I thought. So I moved it back to looking at microbial interactions with nanomaterials, which is more, I think, an easier sell for funding and also incredibly interesting. I mean, nanomaterials are everywhere. Yeah. The world is for cells and for microorganisms especially, the world is a nanoscale interactions. Right?
This is what I wanted to get into today. Okay, yeah, keep going. Cool. Sorry.
So that's exactly what it is. So I was fascinated. So we've been looking at various microbes, bacteria, and cellular fungi and how they interact with nanomaterials. And we have actually looking for some of these materials are actually produced by these bacteria. So we have a whole very interesting material, bacteria cellulose, which we're looking to see how we can improve, change, alter its material properties for applications in the commercial ventures. Like currently it's being used for burn patients, but we can look at it as being part of prosthetic devices, implants, scaffolding for cells.
Is that the technique where you spray the burn and it regrows the tissue? This is
actually, so kombucha?
Yeah.
In that cookie, the SCOBY?
Yeah.
The SCOBY is this symbiotic or this co-culture of a yeast and a bacteria. And these bacteria are often the same bacteria. These I think they're acetobacteria that we work with. They produce a very, very crystalline, very, very pure nanocellulose. And this cellulose is incredible. Once you clean it up, it's amazingly hygroscopic. It holds like 1,000 times its weight in water.
Wow.
And it seems that the fibers themselves interact really well with stem cells. And so I think what we've worked on, a group at Wake, looking at osteocytes and see how these osteocytes can actually secrete bone onto the bacteriocellulose matrix. And they actually do a better job than just being in a dish themselves when you do this type of differentiation. And other people have shown, like, for years, that I think it's the hygroscopic nature, the incredible ability to hold water, really facilitates these fibroblasts and the other skin cells, epidermal cells, to kind of regrow into a tissue. I think it keeps it moist. It's a pretty cool stuff.
So it's kind of like a scaffolding for healing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Interesting.
I should have brought some in. I mean, it's so wild.
What's the what length of time does it take for the wound to heal?
That's a good question. I think it accelerates it up by 50%, I think.
Wow.
It keeps it clean. I think we haven't investigated all the properties, but there's possibly some antimicrobial properties of the bacteriocellulose itself. But I think it's the ability to hold so much water. I mean, and it also does weird things. That my group's found that if you add a mineral, a solution that contains a metal ion, it'll actually somehow interact with the material and serve as a scaffold. So you can do a one-step, real simple thermochemical reaction to build an entire composite in one step. So we built like these copper oxide, bacteriocellulose composites, as well as a student has built bone. He's made hydroxyapatite into this. So it's a really interesting scaffold material for a variety of different applications. We put we've grown semiconductor crystals of gallium oxyhydroxide into the matrix. Okay, I'll send some pictures to you. They're totally cool.
Yeah, it seems like something that can hold 1,000 times its weight in water would be useful in a lot of different applications. Yeah. Like just keeping things moist, like moisture applications. Or,
that's a good point, because we actually were a group of I was working with my group, as well as another research group. We went to NASA, and they were really interested. And we made it to the top, out of a couple hundred applicants, I think we were the top 3. We didn't get funded, but I guess they know our name, so we can keep going back. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff.
What if you could use that in some type of clothing for cooling? Yeah,
I think we've got to try
something like that.
We're doing stuff with that, because I really do think you can grow sheets of this stuff.
Wow.
And you wonder, if it does have different properties. When it's wet, it's incredibly strong. Like, you could wet a toilet paper, or what's it called? Paper cloth. You could wet it, and you could tear it pretty easily.
Yeah.
This stuff.
So it's the opposite.
It seems totally opposite.
Seems like when things get wet, they get weaker.
Yeah.
They lose their integrity. But this one,
it stays wet. It's super strong. It has a different crystallinity than like jeans. So the crystallinity of the cellulose in our jeans is a crystal type 2A, and it's anti-parallel. So the polymers are going in opposite directions. Yeah. This is a 1 alpha. So they're going in they're parallel fibers, and they're offset a bit. So it's a little even different than cotton. I don't know if that contributes to the strength, but I have students who the crystallinity plays an immediate role in the strength of the material. So we're trying to kind of tailor it to see if we can make composites like, not like fiberglass, but sort of like fiberglass and other types of implants. So
I never would think of cotton as a crystalline material, but
you don't. I wouldn't think so either. I mean, I came into it like, wow, this is crazy. It's and it's really, really crystalline. It's actually quite beautiful. I mean,
wow.
When we clear it, so you can grow it up in sheets, and when you basically boil it for half an hour, in 0.1 molar sodium hydroxide, you get rid of all the cells, all the proteins. You're left with this really crystalline cellulosic material. And if it's the more crystalline it is, the more transparent it is. And so you get like these opaque patches in there, but it's a cool stuff. I guess I should have brought some in here. Next time I'll bring some over and you can play with it.
What type of texture does it have?
It's sort of like a wet cotton ball, but slippier, more slippery.
Will it maintain that wetness?
Mm-hmm. You'll hold it for a while. I mean, if it dries out, it gets really brittle.
I wonder if you could use that as an application for prosthetics, for the actual liner itself.
We're thinking, so we actually have a collaboration with a group at Kinesiology where we're looking for a knee brace device and looking for, because there's some suggestion it might have like non-linear mechanical properties, like non-Newtonian, which means that, over two different, over a course of applying a strain, it's going to behave two different properties. Like it'll get stiffer as the more you pull on it. So I'll have some flexibility. So we're trying to use this as a knee brace, but I also think for things like prosthetic devices, other types of it might be very good in the sense that it's cellulose. It's not so immunogenic, but it has a little bit of, I mean, everything is.
Could be more comfortable against your skin.
You could use it as workout clothes. If you don't sweat enough, your clothes fall off.
Well, I guess if you sweat a lot, your clothes would get stronger.
This is so slimy. I mean, but it doesn't rehydrate. Once it dries out, it's like, but so that's one thing we're looking for, to see if we can find additives that would increase the length of it being
how long it will stay hydrated.
Seeing if we can capture that strength aspect by like locking it into a position, like so finding some sort of epoxy. So I have a couple of grad students who are trying to find ways of utilizing it as the base for a composite where we add some sort of epoxy, some sort of cross-linking long poly, another type of polymer to lock that structure in place, but also keep some of the properties like the strength, the flexibility, and some of the other aspects of it, which are attractive. I painted on it. So I took some home and did some watercolor on it. It's really cool as a watercolor medium, but it dried.
That's interesting.
It was really cool. It exploded. So I put it over, had it stretched out over on top of a jar, and I painted some flowers. And look, this is great. This is going to be, and then it dried out, still good. And then something happened, just completely,
just shattered.
Just completely shattered. So it's like a Banksy, right? We lost the whole.
Yeah.
Does it like expand and then or is it just like falls apart?
I think I wasn't there for the actual, but the way there was the leftover remnants of the material everywhere. So I think it swelled up and essentially
blossomed
all over the table.
It just dries out and cracks apart, sort of.
I think it was, I had it tensioned and I think it created a seal. So it is, the porosity is pretty low. It can, especially when it dries, it can hold its,
Are you an artist, Dennis?
Yeah.
Are you an artist?
Yeah. I do some painting. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
10 years, 15 years.
Gotcha.
My daughter's a real artist. She went to school she's in New York as an illustrator.
Awesome.
So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. But I just love it. I do some carving too, but I do more painting just because it's easier to.
That's great.
Do you think your understanding of like molecular level stuff like that kind of helps as an artist? Like, do you think that helps, or does it kind of make you get lost in it a little bit?
I think being an artist and doing stuff like technical stuff, science and stuff is like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And I think it helps slow you down a little bit and appreciate some of the stuff you're doing. Because a lot of times we're kind of going. But it also takes you off of that kind of like that thing that it has to look a certain way. And that's something especially as a biologist, you're given whatever you're studying.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out how it works, what are the key elements that make it work, what the mechanism underlying it is. Yeah. And you don't, as an artist, you can try to force things, but sometimes you let things just happen. And I think it does help the process, the scientific process of just being aware of that. You're discovering, you're breaking down, you're studying, you're trying to understand what you're looking at, but sometimes you have no control over what's there.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that sometimes the artistic process is very much like that.
That's interesting. I'm a science and technology nerd, but I'm also an artist. And I've heard a lot of scientists talk about how they look at art as sort of a type of science in a lot of ways, because I've been playing the guitar a lot recently, which I haven't done since high school much. And me and a friend of mine who's also a comic, he's a really good drummer, and we just started jamming some. And I'm doing stuff on the guitar that I've never done before, and it's really just letting go and just flowing, like going with the flow of the music. and finding things. And that's why I have a brace on my arm. I actually have
Carpal tunnel.
tendonitis.
Tendonitis from
From strumming so much. But it's really it's really amazing though. It's, when you can have that creative expression as an artist. But in science, is there a similar process where you sort of just let go and you just try to let your mind maybe navigate a certain idea or explore an idea?
I think that's exactly. I think I've had this conversation before. Art and science are very tightly linked in the sense that there's a great deal of creativity. The only difference, I think, is that artists don't have to be bound by physical laws and, like I was saying, the creation of what you're given. But the process is very same because you have to use abstract. I mean, the things I look at are small, so I can't really see them. Even with a microscope, I'm only seeing abstractions from that. So I have to think and imagine what might be happening in that process. And then you have to design experiments to test these ideas or questions. Exactly. So you're constantly looking beyond what you actually have available. So imagine what it looks like, imagine how it moves, imagining how, these things interact. These are all, and how do you demonstrate that? Because that's really the key of science. You have to demonstrate and find ways of supporting these ideas that you come up with. Yeah. And so I think that's the same. That's very similar. And they're also very technical. You use your hands a lot. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of letting go of sometimes what you think is this hypothesis you created and crafted so nicely. You don't want it to be like, not supported. It's just not going to work. So you have to find other ways of getting around that. So it is a very kind of cathartic process of letting go when you really want to just get to the answer. And so sometimes you're fighting yourself. And I think that goes with artists. I mean, I can't speak, but the process is probably fairly similar in a lot of ways.
I just like to express my creative side, I guess, in many different mediums. Mostly it's in writing through like comedy or even film, screenwriting type stuff. But mostly comedy now. I once I found comedy, I've fallen in love with that.
So do you actually stand up?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Eric, that's actually how I met Eric. Eric's a veteran comic. He's been at it for 10 or 11 years, right?
Yeah, we just hit started in 2011, September 2011. So been going at it.
That's pretty
for
cool.
Quite a while.
He's a really good comic. But,
some days are better than others. You said you're a fencing coach.
Yeah. So in college, I wrestled, not very good. And then I also, like on the side, there was a club and I did some fencing. So after I got out, I think there was an ad in the newspaper because my first job out of college was asbestos abatement engineer.
Okay.
And the only reason I got that job is because I knew how to work a microscope. I remember going into the interview and they sat me down. She was explaining the job. And I set the scope up into the proper alignment. And she goes, "You're hired." I go, "Excuse me, what's going on here?" She goes, "You're the first person who set the scope up in color illumination. I interviewed 20 people and, a classics major, not a biologist or and set the scope." I go, "Well," and it's funny because I learned to do that in a elective. It was a non-vascular plants course. And I took it because it was from 12 to 3 and we had wrestling practice at 3. Oh. And I was like, I can't go back to my house because I had such a weak will and I was cutting so much weight. I would just eat. So I said, I just go there. And you had to draw these things. So I set the microscope up, draw for 3 hours, go into practice and, whatever. And so it was really kind of fun to get that job. But it basically was going to New York City with pumps. They come out with these, when they're abating the floors for asbestos, you have to take at different critical times, read the filters for the number of fibers. So there's a certain dimension of fibers and a certain density of fibers meant that the place was not safe or not. And that was the job. And it was an interesting position because you get all your work done in the first hour and a half. You show up at 8 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
9, because even though it wasn't hard analysis, but they needed a lot of people. So they hired 2 of us. I don't think we lasted more than 7 months because it was incredibly boring.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But Yeah, that was
those boring jobs are difficult.
Yes.
I one of my first real like human jobs was at a wastewater treatment place. We did industrial wastewater treatment, and so I knew nothing. I was a bartender and a baseball coach when I got that job, and I'd go there, and it was the first hour and a half fixing the last guy's mistakes, and then it was 6 to 7 hours of just watching it, making sure it didn't go off the reels.
Yeah.
And whenever people would come in, from the company to kind of check things out, I would just constantly running around because I felt guilty sitting around all day. And then they were like, you don't have to do that. Like, we know this job is boring and it's babysitting. And so you do just end up, that is a difficult thing to do, is sit idle for 6 hours.
It was really hard. I mean, just sitting there, and they sometimes come in, they were training me to go into the city with pumps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one time, or collect water samples. I collected water samples of some new high rise on 42nd Street. Yeah, they were random tests. One came back high in lead, and I had to call the guy. I had to do every single water fountain in the building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like my boss was like, $10,000 just collecting little bottles of water.
Yeah.
It was just, and I then carried him around Manhattan. And he's like, yeah, this, they're kind of fancy, this big suitcase. People are like, what's that? It's like,
yeah, it's just water.
Water from that building.
Yeah.
And there was no more lead. Where did this lead come from? It's probably from like a a loose solder or something.
That'd be a pretty good sitcom concept, like a lawyer accidentally mixes with your briefcase and he just comes in, Your Honor, and it's just filled with water or something.
What is this?
You mentioned something earlier. I want to get back to it real fast about the cellulose material you're working with. You said it reacts to resistance. It will get stiffer with resistance.
It seems like it might have some sort of there's that whole, and I forget the name of it, water and cornstarch. Have you seen it?
Yeah, we used to call it oobleck.
Oobleck, that's it. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. So it's sort of like that nonlinear stuff, which is really attractive, right? Because if you can, if it's something that's going to stretch and then stop at a certain point, it can allow you and we're thinking.
Well, silly putty works kind of like that too.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to get for this knee brace project that we have, is where you can incorporate it as kind of an external ligament for knee braces. Because, the group I work with is at in the kinesiology department. They're experts in knees and ligament tears. They study a lot in younger children, especially young girls, how the training that you do to condition, soccer players are different. Most of it's geared for young men or boys. And young girls have other kind of, especially once they hit puberty, there's a whole series of changes which makes their joints during the course of a monthly cycle very lax. And so they can actually go through and have injuries. And so they're looking to see if we could build a brace. And I'm at first it was total I don't know if this is going to work. This material is not, but we're slowly getting it. Either we could do it geometrically. You could put weird arrangements of the fiber and the material itself so that the fiber has this multi-dimensional kind of structure.
Oh, right, yeah.
That actually, when you extend it or stretch it, it has two levels of force, stress, strain that it's going to be, or displacement that's going to lead to
prevent hyperextension and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or lateral movements.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with MIT's work with prosthetics? They were doing this 10 years ago, so I'm sure it's way more advanced now. But they had a material they were using. And I'm not sure that it ever made it to the market yet. I think it still may be just in research, but they would take the amputee's limb, and they had this device that would measure the tissue on the limb itself. Because some areas are soft tissue, some are hard tissue. You have bony areas and stuff like that, and it would take measurements of all those areas all the way up, and then they would scan the limb and then put all the data into their program and create this liner that had some of those properties. It was a liner that reacted to, I guess, electrical stimulus. So
I see. So when you were able to kind of transmit motions into another.
Yeah. So
I think I've seen this. I think I've seen.
So the liner itself, if you step down, the material they used would be stiffer on the outside over maybe the softer areas.
Okay.
Or maybe the bonier areas.
it would react to the actual mechanical properties of the substrate to kind of like allow it to
support,
adjust.
to give you more comfort and support
that's pretty
of
cool.
the limb. And then also it would allow you they could somehow run leads. Maybe the leads actually came from the prosthetic itself, because you could flex certain muscles and it would cause the feet or the foot of the prosthesis to react.
To move,
and it could actually make you jump.
No shit.
It was a really powerful prosthetic. It looked like
I think I've seen this fellow. Is this
like a dinosaur leg.
What was this guy's name? Is it her?
I can't.
Because actually, one of my friends at the Nano School, a distant cousin of his, actually is he's a mountain climber, and I think he lost.
Yeah,
it's a her. Yeah, his name is her. I've seen this. This stuff is amazing.
Yeah, he has two. He's a double.
Because I think he was a mountain climber who something happened. And he's related to one of my good friends at the Nano
incredible.
School.
Wow,
yeah, it's crazy because I've seen the example that because Dan's really into this translation. How do we, how does technology move from from the lab into the workplace? And his examples how this guy is so passionate about, and he has a problem. And he's finding ways to solve that problem.
He happens to be a scientist.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool.
But the stuff that Dr. Michael Levin's working on though with regeneration of limbs is really amazing. I think that's probably going to be the future of prosthetic. It'll probably just replace prosthetics.
Yeah, I think
all of it will be us just regrowing things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that and figuring out how to stop like this cellular aging, and then you're all set.
Yeah,
you got a permanent.
Seems like we're close.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about today was it seems like as technology advances, and it's exponential, and we're in a really cool time, seemingly, of exponential growth of technology. It's changing so rapidly you can't even keep up with it.
That's pretty true.
But it seems like as we get more advanced, the technology gets smaller and smaller, and especially when you're looking at things like microchips and that type of technology. I think they're down to what, 4 atoms, like circuits that are 4 atoms wide or something.
Yeah, they can get down super small. I think the thing is that the whole idea of Moore's law, I think we talked about it last time, where you go, it's every 2 years it
doubles.
The impact, the density increase or doubles.
Yeah.
But we're now reaching this threshold where we can't get much smaller, because now you get into like, and I think that's where like quantum computing is going to take over, is where we're actually dealing with the subatomic or the atomic state of these components, where they're going to give us store information that way.
Yeah, well, and
it's also getting, but you're right, it's getting smaller and smaller, and we're reaching some sort of plateau, and we're trying to find ways to get around some of these things.
Yeah, and guys like Ray Kurzweil, he talks about this type of stuff too, and he says that we never hit a plateau. Even though it looks like we'll hit one, we never do. It always continues. We always
find another way, and I think we find alternative ways of doing this.
Because it's all technology. It's not just that technology. It's all of it.
And we find a solution. We find a way around it. I agree with that. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, because I think, well, I'm on this Department of Defense project, and there's a couple words they gave that we're not allowed to use. One is climate change. They don't want to hear that. It's not they're against it. They just don't want to use it because I guess politically it's
charged word.
Charged word. And sustainability is another one. And sustainability is this idea of like, it's charged because, economically we don't want to be sustaining where we are. We want to be growing or something like that. I don't know the actual things, but
it's got to be sustainable growth though, right?
Yeah, it's got to be sustainable growth. But this is, I think, what the idea is, if we reach a plateau, the sustainable aspect is finding a solution that meets the same standards or betters it, and finds a way to kind of circumvent those issues that stopped us at that plateau and create sometimes whole new industries. And I think that's the opening up of new avenues versus kind of sticking with the same old.
Well, those corrective technologies are exponential also.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's,
everything is.
It's hubris to think that we are really controlling any of it, because it's so complex. But my thought is it seems intuitive that we're going to reach a level maybe soon where we can manipulate matter on a single atom basis. Yeah. And if you can do that, then you can
a large scale
do almost anything, right?
Because we have, people with certain probe microscopes, like certain, they can push. There's a whole thing in the IBM they spelled with boron.
Oh,
you can individually manipulate these things. I think on the scale we're looking like additive manufacturing. And so once we start seeing 3D printing moving up to kind of like having not just being able to make composites, but really making complicated very, very small kind of structures
on an atomic level.
On the atomic level, or at least using dyes or inks or that can manipulate stuff so you can build up like we do cells. I mean, living systems do that naturally. And I think this biomimetics is one of the things that people want to attract, is that the cell will secrete small molecules, proteins and sugars and polysaccharides, et cetera. And these things will serve as building blocks for creating an entire new scaffold. So when you look at biomaterials like bones or wood, there's this beautiful hierarchy from the macro scale down to the nano scale that leads to all these really emergent properties, like, amazingly strong weight to strength, density to strength ratios, which you don't get. And I think that's what we're looking at. I think what you're talking about is like this idea of being able to manipulate stuff. And that's the hard part, because we can manipulate atoms, but we can't do it more than like one word or actually 3-letter abbreviation of a big company. We can't write the whole thing. But I think once we start finding technologies where we can do this,
you really manipulate.
You can start making a whole bunch at once. You're going to start being able to see amazing things.
Eventually, it's just all Legos, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. And just finding that the right box to open up and the right tool sets to use.
It's all Minecraft. Yeah. It's very strange.
Yeah, it is.
Did you see the Nobel Prize this year in physics?
Which one?
It was the 3 physicists. They were studying the John Bell theorem.
No, I didn't see that one.
It's pretty amazing.
I have to look. I know the click chemistry. I saw that one, and I know the medicine was the ancient DNA guy. Which I was like, how the hell is that guy? And I missed the physics one.
So the physics one, they were studying quantum entanglement and the John Bell theorem.
Okay,
and so
I remember that now.
They their theory confirmed that the universe isn't locally real, which it's just mind blowing stuff.
It's kind of crazy.
So it's, like Einstein's issue with quantum entanglement was that if you're not observing it, it's not there.
Yeah.
So he's like, that can't be possible.
And he also didn't like the fact that the universe is like, a crapshoot, basically. He found that it was really disconcerting.
Yeah, well, based on this research, it looks like, or it seems like that, the problem with quantum entanglement is information can't travel faster than the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
So if these two particles are, no matter the distance they are separated, they're always entangled. That's impossible.
So then how does that work?
Yeah, the information would have to be traveling faster than the speed of light if they're always perfectly entangled. So
and that seems to be the case, right?
Well, the
spookiness of the whole thing is like those at least the particles that they.
Well, what they proved was it's all information. There is no time and space, and all of reality is just it's
just information.
It's just information. So all the information is just in one singularity, and we are interfacing with our information is interfacing with all the other information within that singularity, and we when we observe the information, it basically appears. It renders. So we're rendering our reality as conscious agents. It's a lot like Donald Hoffman's stuff.
When Neil said the word singularity, you had a reaction. What was that?
Well, I've always thought about, how do we not know that we've, upon our consciousness being created, we talk about space, right?
Yeah.
And we're spatially distinct in this room, but really, do we have to be? That could be just a perception of exactly, we could all be basically occupying
That's what they've kind of proved. It's all information. It's all in one singularity.
And this is how
it could be black holes. We could just be in the middle of a black hole.
Yeah, altogether.
Yeah, and then all the other black holes are just
this is sort
other
of like,
universes.
And this is how we're interpreting the information based on
a podcast studio.
Everyone's here.
I have a.
Thank you all for coming.
This is just an idea, but and it's more. I like philosophical ideas because there's no rules. But I was thinking, it could be reality could be this sort of maybe it's all one thing, and it's an intelligent being, and each of us, each conscious agent within the system, we're like antennas that are connected to the source of this consciousness. And as the antennas, these bodies, they allow us to take in and receive certain types of information and interpret that information and record it. And then, as a person, you sort of, you have this part of your mind that's sort of an observer. So no matter what your body's doing, if you lose control of your body, there's a part of your mind that's still just observing that loss of control. It's almost separate. And that's maybe that's what's connected to the source of all of consciousness or reality. And so when you die, all of that information you took in goes back to the source.
Yeah, it's recycled.
And then more of us pop up to take in and collect more information until eventually we're all connected directly, and no information is lost.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting concept, because it's almost like, it's very, I would say religious, but it does have like this notion that we all are one. We come out, we're like individual antennas. I like to use lenses because I feel like we're drawing things in and projecting things out.
Yeah.
And like as art, I think we're all artists, basically. We all pull in information, we pull the world around us, and we use some better than others, our language and our ability to communicate, to express ourselves.
Yeah.
But we're all, if you think about, how, a lot of religions treat, you are born, you're alive, you die, you go, then there's this idea of heaven. But if heaven is simply just going back to this shared consciousness where you're still part of it, and you kind of wonder where the information goes, right? We all
no
have personalities.
Is lost.
Exactly. We have personalities. We have all this stuff, what we do in our minds, all these incredible ideas and experiences we have. Where do they go?
Well, if it's all just information.
But if it's information, it's like energy, right? You
creates
can't
a lot
destroy
more
it.
possibilities.
Yeah. It's neither destroyed or it's simply, converted.
I think we're probably just, whatever we are, we're a part of something much bigger that's sort of awakening.
Yeah.
And hopefully, a lot of scientists are focusing more on complexity, and they're looking at life as sort of like the anti-entropy, entropy rather.
Yeah.
And maybe that life is what will prevent the universe from dying. It's the proliferation of life.
And the ideas that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything could expand together in some type of a new system.
Kind of wonder, because life is really kind of interesting. I mean, like living cells.
Yeah.
They're so complicated and so dynamic, and yet we still know almost nothing about them.
And it used to be a star.
Yeah.
Which is
it used to be all this stuff. Yeah. I didn't realize where all the elements came from. I remember in grad school or in undergrad, there was a supernova. The physics department got together and had this whole thing. And it's like, wow, this is where everything below iron comes from inside of that's nuts. I didn't never thought about that. I don't think many people do. Think about where all this stuff we have around us comes from, but it all comes from essentially stardust, right?
All the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's all just information too.
Yeah.
Which, the information thing is exciting because if we can find ways to manipulate the information, we can travel. And it's like you said, we always look outward, but maybe we should be looking inward. Because it may all be inward.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about this whole idea of, like I said, information, because I've seen it recently in science where people start talking more just about information, even in the biological sense. Like they talk about information in, information out. And this is like, it's not like they're even breaking it down into like, it's kind of nice because they're kind of getting rid of like, what do you mean? Information, it could be like a DNA sequence, it could be a shape, it could be, and this is all being stored by something. One of the projects I'm part of in the lab is called DMOS. We're using DNA to store information, but we're doing it differently than, say, George Church's lab or other groups around the country are, where they're literally taking DNA synthetic materials and they're making new pieces of DNA, ascribing meaning to those, and they could build up a whole library, like books, movies. They could put them into bacteria. So this project we have is where we actually have been able to take a template DNA and rewrite and re-encode information on this. We actually just submitted the paper yesterday.
Wow. And
it's really kind of wild because we use like a CRISPR technology, which can actually go in, target specific sites on our template DNA. And by doing so, all it's doing is making mutations. So we have a string of C's and we change them to T's. But if that happens in certain blocks, that becomes a bit of information. So we're trying to see how well we can actually, how much information we get. And we've actually been able to store like sentences of information, these little 1 kilobase piece of DNA. And that's just by changing one base. So we're trying now this multiplex it using different enzymes. But the idea is it's all information. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And it's all like being able to put that into this space and then store it into a series of where my part of the project is actually finding the cellular aspects where you can store entire libraries of messages. It won't replace our computers, but it's going to replace theoretically like long storage archives because DNA is so much more stable.
Wow.
Yeah. So the notion is we could put this in there. We can actually have like freezers with bacteria have entire books or things stored in the DNA that's preserved into that bacterium.
That's amazing.
DNA storage wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
New type of hard storage. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
You keep it on the low down. That's really like slow. Like like if we had cell phones with this technology, we're able to expand it.
But isn't there a thought that our
6 days later you'd be able to get your text?
it's definitely long-term storage?
Yeah, it's long-term storage.
Is there isn't there some speculation that our DNA stores information anyway?
It does. I mean, it stores all the stuff that
Well,
to
yeah,
make
all the
us,
stuff that
right.
makes us, but also information that gives us instinctual behaviors and,
And
stuff.
that's
like
the interesting aspect. It does. I mean, and that's the hard part about behaviorals. How does it actually? Is it dictating the wiring of our DNA, the ability of our DNA to be wired in a certain way, so our behaviors are controlled by certain plasticities we have because you have a certain set of enzymes or structural proteins that enable you to react one way, and I have a different set.
Yeah.
And Eric has a different set. These are all working around. So that's the hard part. That's the part I'm talking about. So when we look about, we know a lot, but we really know almost nothing when it comes to a lot of stuff. And I think one of the big stuff is like, how do we look at things like, I mean, mental health, right? Mental health.
Yeah.
There's a heritable component to this aspect, but how do we actually get at what exactly these genes are doing? When they identify SNPs or specific markers that are associated with it, it's still, I think, up to grabs how.
I have a hypothesis on that,
Okay.
on societal behaviors. I think it seems to me that the majority of people's behaviors are based on their circumstances, and if you, and it goes back to your body being almost separate from your mind, and it's sort of a dualistic view maybe, but I think there is some truth to it too. I think that, if you're abused as a child, your body is going to have a natural inclination to react a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get upset or overexcited, your amygdala gets activated, and you start and it starts expressing a lot of adrenaline, and you just maybe it's road rage or it's just aggression or whatever. In that moment, there's a part of your mind that's observing that happening, and it could even be saying, "Hey, we should calm down." But maybe you've just completely lost control of your body, or you have addicts. Addicts are a great example of someone who has no control over their body anymore. Like their mind knows that this is not good for my body, but they can't control the body. And
there's like a split between the two.
Yeah, there's some sort of separation, and I think the solution to all these issues, or to most of these issues, is to eliminate poverty.
Oh, hell yeah.
And you eliminate the trauma, because people are focused on the person, like, oh, this person's a bad person.
Yeah.
No, this person's had a lot of bad things happen to them, most likely, and that's they're reacting to that, and they could be broken completely, and so maybe they need to be separated from society. But you don't have to torture them or hurt them.
No.
You have to. I think we need to focus more on healing instead of punishing.
No, I agree with you totally. I mean, because we're the product of years of conditioning, right? How we react and respond is based on what we were exposed to, and unfortunately, there's poverty is a big thing. I think that's one of the biggest.
Probably the biggest.
Yeah, especially and it seems like it's getting worse, especially as the world grows more globally, and the economy becomes much more shifted. We're seeing within our own country a great deal of poverty kind of emerging, but in other countries they're slowly wanting to come to us. And I think that's.
Well, it's been rapidly decreasing globally for years, and then it seems like over the past maybe 2 decades in this country, it's increased.
Yeah,
which is it's
why is that
strange?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think it's because I think it's when you have capitalism, when you have any ism by itself, it's unregulated ism. So unregulated capitalism creates this imbalance. So you have this heavy high, like top-heavy society
Yeah.
where these giant corporations are pulling all the resources up. And so it's draining the resources from the bottom.
And
there's no balance.
Yeah, they're converting the resources into cash or money.
Yeah.
And it's being distributed, but it's actually not being distributed.
It's not. It's just,
and that's
it's a cycle. Because the only people that can regulate these giant machines are regulators, and there's only a few hundred of those, maybe 400 or 500 that are making decisions for 330 million people, and those people are mostly controlled by these corporations. So it's like a paradox. It's a paradox. You have
you're just not going to win.
Yeah, it's just a runaway.
Yeah,
it's unregulated capitalism.
Yeah,
and I like certain elements of capitalism.
I'm not against it. I mean, that's what our country's based on. But it also, I agree with you. I think it doesn't account for specific things that are necessary for eliminating some of the worse stuff. Like it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I think our main goal should be to have a floor in society that's high enough that nobody's in poverty.
Yeah.
So you have because I don't like the argument about inequality because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. People want different things, but we all have the same basic needs. And I think if you meet all those basic needs, then people can decide how far they want to take their life, or how people have different levels of ambition, different interests. And some people's interests aren't very valuable, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to pursue those things, And so I think if you have a high floor, then you resolve a lot of those problems. Then you could be as successful as you want. But I think we just need a better structure. Also, I think our copyright laws are heavily flawed. They stop a lot of progress as far as innovation and research, because everybody's greedy. Like it's the scarcity mentality. Like I can't share my information with you. I think everything should almost be open source.
I kind of agree.
We would get there so much faster.
It'd be, I mean, talk about Star Trek, right?
Yeah, right. Just eliminate money.
Yeah, they don't have any money at Star Trek. They have those replicators that make everything. But
because you can you can manipulate matter, so you can have. There's no limit to what you can do or have. Or
you just print a pound of gold. It's not going to do any good, but if you want that, you can do it.
Well, your driveway could be your vehicle. You could just say, I want to drive a Lamborghini today, and it just appears. It just morphs out of the driveway, right?
I wish that would happen.
Hey, go shovel my Lamborghini.
Well, that's the guy. I have a conversation about driverless cars.
Can't wait.
Really? I'm there too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're gonna look like cars we have, right? They're gonna be like, this room, 4 chairs and wheels, and let the car go wherever it wants to go.
Absolutely, an office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then, even like, why would you have to go anywhere except to buy stuff or out to dinner? I mean, the office too is changing. I think that's the other thing is like remote. I don't know. Education after the pandemic, you saw that a lot of stuff went remote, and it was challenging to teach that way. But I think it could work if you practice a little. If we had some better tools and I think we have those now.
I mean, that was one of the things that came out of the pandemic mostly, right? Was there was some innovation that happened because it was forced, right? Teaching over the internet, meetings, working from home, all of those things. And now, we're pulling back and correcting on some of those, but a lot of that stuff is still in place, right?
Yeah. Even though the remote stuff, some people I've heard of some institutions have now said you could have worked from home when you were during the pandemic, and people were very productive, but they're not allowing it now. So they're bleeding out because people are finding jobs that they could do, working from home, being more efficient.
I think we are very social creatures. I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we can interact with each other.
Oh, face to face, for sure.
Face.
Some of us are very social creatures. Some of us just want to stay home.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind.
And some of those need to get out.
That's true. I'm sitting right here, Neil.
There's a balance. I actually don't mind. I didn't mind working from home.
No, I like it sometimes too.
Yeah. Just the social aspect's important, though. It's really nice to be in front, talking face to face.
At least the people you like.
Yeah, at least the people you like.
You mentioned, so talking about social skills, you mentioned a word earlier before we started filming, a phrase that I was interested in, and it was soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying you were doing a lecture, and part of it is teaching soft skills to people, scientists and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think it's an interesting thing. I think Neil would be interested in that as well.
Yeah. So the idea of this course is to teach people how to interact, I say socially, but professionally, to engage people who might hire them, people who they might be looking for information in a way that allows them or enables them to be kind of receptive under a variety of different things. And I think some of it's like some of the soft skills are interview skills. Like, what kind of questions should you expect? How should you answer these questions? Soft skills are like, I think my colleague who I teach the course with, who's Dan, he's the fellow whose nephew or distant cousin is this researcher up at MIT. He's, there's also this cultural kind of learning that different cultures have different ways of greeting people. So he brought the point, like, he grew up in Massachusetts, and in an Italian neighborhood, there's a lot of physical contact, hugging, and and then when he got his first jobs, he was working over in the Far East, and you don't engage in some of these behaviors. And so learning that's really important because you're respecting your fellow person, your future colleague or future boss even, but you're also understanding how you could work with them in a way that can like kind of meet the middle ground. And it's not just acquiescing to some of these cultural aspects, which could be somewhat antiquated. It's meeting in the middle. And so we do a lot of kind of practice interviews, practice conversations, people presenting their information in a way that's open access for not just scientists or not just educated people, but even like small kids, like kids going to middle school or elementary school.
Is the idea of teaching these soft skills, is this a new thing? Has it been around a while? I'm curious really if it's a thing that we've had to hone in on with the addition of social media and things like that, where it's keeping people a little distracted. And
I think it's partly to that, but we're one of the first, from what I understand, we're one of the first schools to actually, many schools have these types of programs. At UNCG, I think we're one of the first ones to actually have a 2-semester course where we actually engage. The first part of this course, which is this proposal writing, I constructed the course based on the students have to have a proposal to defend. This is how they get candidacy for doctorate studies, and they continue and finish their research. But what I was noticing is that people come out of grad schools and have no idea how to politely criticize or evaluate a body of work. I got some reviews back, several years ago, which were just rants. And they're like, well, I didn't mean to piss you off, but at the same time, it seems like you're very angry. And I got nothing out of it. So when I critique someone's manuscripts or grants, you balance, right? You summarize what the person was expressing, you give strengths and then weaknesses, and you come to a balanced decision, like accept, reject, work on this, etc. And I wasn't getting that from a lot of these. And I realized it's because a lot of times what we do is we expect stuff without showing people what we want. Right. The same thing goes in school, right? I've had my advisor in grad school, he would be like, just do it. Where's your proposal? Well, how's it supposed to look? Just do it. And so you just give it to him. He's like, this is not it. So you'd spend this trial and error getting something that looked like it for him. And it was just ridiculous. And so I'm figuring, if you don't show people how to do something, you can't expect, that's insanity. You can't expect to get what you want. And so this course kind of goes right. So the first part of the course is criticism and writing. And it also builds up I designed it like a NSS study section. So they're like in there providing critiques, reviews, and really balancing out how and these are all different projects. So everyone's kind of like a little bit not totally in the know of what's going on. Right. So that's the kind of and this part is much more open, where we cover like publishing processes or practices. We cover things like interviews and these types of soft skills, which we don't, if you don't practice something, you're not going to get good at it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great, especially today, because it's almost a course in empathy too, right?
Yeah.
But it's
exactly because people, when they submit stuff, there's a lot of work. When I read a manuscript, it's not like, oh, this wasn't written in 5 minutes. and they just slipped it under the door, like, because they were late.
Right.
They spent a lot of time doing it. So there is empathy. You have to feel for the people doing this. And,
yeah.
I generally don't see, there's the lecture we had today was on publishing and, how things are ranked. Like, so there's journals that are highly ranked, highly sought after to get your paper in there. Whether your paper is read by anyone, it doesn't matter. A lot of the desire is just to get it published in this, like Science or Cell or Nature, which are high impact, have a lot of impact journals. Everyone knows them. They're kind of broad spectrum, so a lot of different scientists read them. So you've kind of made it if you get to one of those journals. Yeah. But if no one reads your paper, or they don't want to read your paper, then what's the point? So there's this whole kind of twisted logic that people use for when they do publish, what's driving them. And it's not just to get their information out. Sometimes it's notoriety.
And also teaching people to be more understanding with other people, especially with their creations, because we're all very sensitive to our creations. Yeah. It's like even my daughter, she's 6, and I'll critique her artwork. She loves to draw and write. Yeah. And I'll give her little pointers like, this is amazing. This is great. You should try to go back and add in some more elements to your work in the background. And she'll give me resistance because I'm talking about her work, Yeah, but if I flip through her books, her drawing books and stuff, they'll start out really simple, but then they get really complex toward the end. Her artwork is starting to evolve into something new, and
she's experimenting and getting much more.
Like they went from black and white pencil stick figures to full color, color pencil images that
real figures
look like real figures. They're starting to look like real things, and she's developing this talent.
That's pretty cool.
And
it's pretty great. Yeah,
it's very cool.
Being able to watch the progress of that, and flip through it is.
It's nice to see that.
I was showing a buddy of mine the other day one of her books, and the first page I opened to it said, "My life is so fun." I was like, "Yes."
That's awesome.
But it's today what I've noticed a lot with, especially with younger people, when I was a kid, we didn't have the internet. It was a very analog society, so it was all face-to-face interaction all the time.
Played,
and today, a lot of younger people don't have that have those social skills on that level. Like they're very uncomfortable on face-to-face interaction. Totally. So I think your classes are going to be great for people in that, just helping people develop these social interactions that maybe they're missing because everything's so digital.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why we are even emphasizing it more, because you see that they're awkward. You see that they want to, not immediately respond, or they don't know initially how to respond. They have to think about it because there's that lag that we have with all our texting and the ability to kind of communicate. Sometimes it's not immediate. Like you could say, "How you doing?" I can hold off for a few minutes. "How am I doing? Let me think about that."
Yeah.
But you can't do that with an elevator, a 30-minute, or 30-second, or a 1-minute elevator pitch.
Right.
You have to be able to have something relaxed, easily understood, and comfortable and true and representative of what you have. And so I think this course is really kind of reaching out, or that's what it's for. It's to kind of build that confidence, and also to build up kind of a series of mechanisms that the students can respond to, that they can fall back on. Because again, I think you're right. I don't think they have. Some are better than others.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of social anxiety just naturally.
Yeah.
But because of the way I was conditioned growing up to be used to interacting with people, you would never know. Because I know that it's an irrational thing within me, and if I just start talking to someone or just interact with this person, it'll go away.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
And I think when you'll go home, because I'm an introvert, I'll go home. I like talking with people. I'll go home and then for like hours, just not talk to anybody. It's like, I got a detox here because it's just so much of a drain.
Yeah.
You go to a party, you're like, "Oh my God, I did it. That was so much fun." But I'm not good for anyone. But that's everyone's personality is a little different. But you're right. I think there's a lot of.
That's my experience with comedy. It's, it's like the anxiety leading up to it, and then you got to go. You do the thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully everyone had a good time, and then I got to get the fuck out of there and shut it all down.
That sounds like teaching a class. That's essentially what I do. You get in there like, "Oh shit, am I prepared?" Oh, too late now.
Too late. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Fuck it. I'm getting in there and just talking.
Yeah.
And then it's over. And you're like, "Okay, was it good?" I have no idea.
Yeah.
No complaints. I'm going home or I'm going back to my office. But it's the same sort of anytime you have to, and a lot of times the lectures are fairly structured, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes we have discussions.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where they're going to go. And so the preparation is going to be a little bit looser.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Human interaction is an interesting thing.
Yeah, it really is.
I've heard it described like being an introvert is like you wake up with a certain amount of coins, and then every social interaction is like you spend one of those coins.
Yeah.
And like you like being social and everything, you just spend those coins. And if you're extrovert, you have to go talk to people to get more of those coins.
Sometimes it
That's an
seems
interesting
like
idea. I like that idea.
Yeah.
that's a good idea. Sometimes it seems like people that are really extroverted though, they miss out on a lot of the really intimate stuff.
Yeah.
Like they spread themselves so thin across so many different people that it's almost hard to know who those people are.
Yeah. I think sometimes with extroverts, I think sometimes because they're seeking, they're strengthened by social interactions. They don't really care about the necessary. Actually, that's judgmental, but maybe sometimes the quality or the interaction doesn't matter. I'm talking to you. We can talk about anything. This is great. And I just need more and more of that. Whereas someone where you want to make meaningful contact, I guess, I don't know if all introverts are.
It's a difference between how much you can tolerate small talk.
Yeah.
I feel like an extrovert can, how's the weather?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? Tell me about your mother.
Yeah, exactly. Which for lunch? That sounded good.
Yeah.
Man, there was something I wanted to bring up too recently, and I can't think of what it was. It was one other.
I think I was supposed to answer a question about the fencing. So I was a fencing coach in college, and then I went to, it was Oak Knoll School of Girls. So it was a girls' school. They had a fencing team. I went there, bought fencing stuff. We did really well for we were undefeated. We beat the number 2 team. This is New Jersey, number 2 team in the state. They accused me of cheating because they said I was giving them signs, like coaching them.
Right.
And I was shouting out, let's give because there's like positions, and I kept shouting like maybe 2 or hold your 4, hold your 4.
Yeah, you were coaching.
Yeah. And they're like, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't coach.
And I'm like, what kind of sport is this? I didn't know. No one told me. It's like wrestling. You're out there screaming. I was a coach at Bishop as an assistant coach. You're screaming at these guys, get your head up.
I saw our first base coach giving a batter signals. We had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
It's
That's
crazy.
why we brought you here to face
It's
the
like-
allegations.
Yeah.
It's like MMA. MMA is real fighting,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're yelling out things the whole time.
Yeah. And the guy, and I tried to tell him, so even if I was shouting, they couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
He had this helmet on. And they're accusing me just because we beat your team, who's number 2 in the state. You're a little upset.
Yeah.
And then they came back and clobbered us because I think there was like some dance or something halfway through it. And they're like, wow, we're so excited about this dance. I'm like, all right, whatever. Yeah. So we went like 7-0 and then 7-7 by the end of the year. And then like they were just so out of shape that I'm not a good coach.
What do you do personally for like to control your body and your mind? Do you exercise?
Oh yeah, I do yoga pretty much every day.
Oh, okay.
I love yoga.
Interesting.
I'm totally addicted to yoga.
How long have you been doing
I want to
it?
get into yoga.
Like 16 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm actually a registered instructor.
Nice.
So I got it last year. I mean, I teach at Get Outdoors. I'm doing did a paddleboard workshop yoga thing, and I do it.
I know Andy.
Yeah. Andy, he's cool.
So you do outdoor paddleboard yoga.
Yeah.
They just keep adding things, levels of difficulty to it.
Yeah, so I paddleboard and I paddle. I fish a little bit, and fishing's kind of fun. But it's also one of these things you don't have to. You're even just doing it without catching anything is fishing. Just sitting there. And then I do a lot of yoga, and I do at 2 studios in town. I had some weird. I think I got like a post-COVID thing. So when I was talking last time, I was more deep into this. I sort of recovered from it, but I was having some issues. And so the heat really does bother me a lot. So I might be moving to another studio as per my doctor.
Like a long COVID type thing?
It's like a long COVID. They did a MRI and they found, I went to the neurologist, that's nothing, but they found all these like lesions and they say they're just some sort of small vessel, but I have other issues. And they think it's just a long COVID. COVID's nasty.
Was it
nasty?
Something I read recently was a treatment. I think maybe it's Benadryl is effective
really?
On long COVID. I think I'm not sure if it was Benadryl. It was something. They've recently discovered something.
I can't drink. I had 2 glasses of wine over Christmas, on Christmas Eve, and I was vomiting and blackout unconscious the whole night. And this is like, I looked it up, says some people were experiencing extreme intolerance of alcohol after COVID. I'm like, and I had this once in grad school, I had mono. So I'm wondering if mono, the Epstein-Barr virus, is reactivated.
Yeah.
In mono, I had a really bad case. I got mono from my brother. He used my toothbrush. So people say, oh, that's really gross. It's like, no, he used my toothbrush. Came home
That
from
is really
break.
gross, though.
It was gross because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like I came home for a week and I got up late. And then one morning I got up to go like fishing or hiking or something. And my toothbrush is in the bathroom and it was sopping wet. And I'm like, what the fuck did I do? So I looked around the bathroom and I found behind the hamper in this big wad of dust, another red toothbrush. But the bristles were all like, you know, like, I don't know if he's like just chews on this toothbrush. I'm like, this is his and this is mine. He's been using it. So I threw it away and got a new one. And then I was working out at the gym. I got this massive headache. I was exhausted. I thought, I have a brain tumor. I went to sauna, try to get it out. Go to the doctor. He's like, got some bad news. I'm like, got a tumor. He's like, you got mono. I'm like, God damn toothbrush. But it was a bad case. So I had all spring semester I had this thing. And then in the summer I felt better. I had a James Bond party, made a couple martinis to practice, unconscious the entire party. So that was the other time, the same event, because I'm not necessarily that much of a lightweight, but it was really, so yeah, I'm switching studios. So Dancing Dog Studio, awesome. It's on State Street. It's a really great practice, really hard. It's in the, and then there's another one, Radiance, which is another one, plugging them. So if you want to go, I can see what I know what Dancing Dog is. I think I get a free guest.
Promo code Nano.
You know, the alcohol thing's interesting because back in, it was probably 2015, maybe 16. My wife and I were up in New York, and we had a few drinks for dinner, and then a couple after, but not anything crazy. I mean, more than
4 or 5 hours,
Yeah.
you're processing it all the time.
And I felt really intoxicated, almost like just completely inebriated.
Yeah.
And I was like, did somebody drug me?
It's like a roofie or something.
Yeah. And the next morning I woke up and I was sick. I mean, violently sick.
Oh, that's awful.
And we had to go meet some friends at a restaurant, and I had to keep getting up to go to the bathroom because I was so sick. And my friend's wife was a nurse. I said, hey, do you think you could get me into the hospital just so they could rehydrate me? And she's like, yeah, we can get you in. And so I had to go
nice.
Yeah, they hooked me up to an IV and I was fine. But after that incident, every time I would drink, I would have that reaction. Even if I had like 1 or 2 glasses of wine,
That's crazy.
the next day I would be violently sick. And I went to my doctor about it, and he said sometimes it just happens to people. Like you
just get sensitive.
And I have my genome sequence, so I have some predisposition to alcohol sensitivity, but I also have predisposition to alcoholism. So it's kind of a good thing. But I've almost just quit drinking completely because of it. It's not as bad as it used to be. My tolerance is
That's interesting.
more normal now. But there was a period of probably 3 years where I couldn't drink at all.
I was like in the early 2000s, I had some issues. Actually, for like 10, 15 years, I didn't drink anything at all because it was giving me like a weird, I don't know what the sensation was. It was a weird sensation, which wasn't like you feel like you have a beer or two. It was just,
Right.
And actually I was making beer at the time. So I was like, I had to give that whole hobby up because if you can't drink what you make, what's the point of doing it?
Right.
It's kind of awful.
I don't know, the guy who made Fender guitars didn't play the guitar.
You did it?
No, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. I like beer. Even though now I don't even know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah, I used to like beer a lot too. I just don't drink it anymore though.
I like the hard liquor. Isn't so bad, but because it's all the same. People are like, oh, you had a Manhattan. That's hardcore. It's like, well, it's not any different than drinking a beer.
Alcohol's alcohol.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Alcohol.
It tastes good.
The last time, before we wrap up, Dennis was in, you had a bunch of things that you wanted to talk to him.
Yeah.
The next time he came in, did we hit all of those? Is there anything left on the table for you?
We hit all of them at one,
All right.
and I can't find it.
Oh, gotcha.
Well,
next time.
I thought I need to
Yeah, for sure.
write it down, but
Yeah.
I thought of it earlier, and I can't think of what it is. But man, it's been a pleasure having you back in the studio.
It's awesome to be here.
Yeah.
I love coming down here. It kind of makes my day. It's a good way to end a day. It's a good way to start a day. So whenever you guys want,
Well, anytime you're working on something new, or you have,
I could tell we have some good stuff coming out. Like I said, we have a new, like I said, this DoD. We got this new. It's called Icons. We're going to DoD in Natick up in Massachusetts, and so we have some really interesting collaborations there. And some students are graduating. We're doing a lot of stuff, environmental stuff. So we have some stuff with looking at nanoparticle interactions. Specifically, we're focusing on in this as polystyrene and plastic nanoparticles. So plastics are really awful, right? So they this mechanically break down. We've outdone ourselves. We made molecules that are way, way too stable. And so the question one of my students who's graduating this semester asked is like, what impact does this have on the cell's gene expression and transcriptome? And it turns out it's, you add polystyrene nanoparticles to E. coli, which is kind of what we tested it on initially. You see this 250 genes turn on. That doesn't happen when you do other treatments. Wow. And so this whole idea is the cells aren't dead. And that's the key, is like a lot of material science is based on, does the material kill? Does it not kill? If it doesn't kill, it's biocompatible. If it kills it, then you use it for like controlling whatever, anti-cancer or whatever. But the problem with that approach is that if you have something that's going to be a long-term effect, like the questions we're asking is, do these changes to the genome change the way these bacteria interact with other bacteria in communities? Are we creating kind of like, are we culling or changing the way they talk to each other, the way they build microbial communities in microbiomes? Does this lead to an alteration of how, things that rely on microbiomes to happen? And like a lot of our, recycling involves this enormous, when things die, things get recycled, things get broken down.
Yeah, fungus.
Are we changing this? Are we changing the way these things interact by putting plastics in there? And the plastics are doing something like saying, okay, we're not going to use this synthetic pathway or this anabolic pathway or catabolic pathway. We're going to switch over to something else. And so there's, I think, a lot of concern about this. And so hopefully, we'll get Theo's paper out, but it's really kind of it was an eye opener. I wasn't really expecting that many genes to be activated. When you put gold particles, you only get like 50 genes, oh wow! So you don't get as much. We found 8 genes that are shared amongst several particles, and that's what his paper's on. But the polystyrene stuff is, I would find terrifying. I mean, we have it in our system. They're finding it at the Marianas Trench. They find it in pristine amounts. It's everywhere.
We are seeing different types of, I guess, bacteria and fungus that are eating.
And they eat it, exactly.
Now.
And so you're wondering this, so how's that doing? So you're creating this food for these weird ass bacteria that have adapted to this and probably gone through some sort of selection process to, alter some of the enzymes, mutate or evolve some of the enzymes to allow them to be better at processing these hydrocarbon-based or these petroleum-based stuff.
Yeah.
Totally cool, totally crazy, and a little bit frightening, because we're talking about poverty, but we also talk about, poverty involves feeding people, feeding the world. And if we start changing this stuff, we're starting to change a lot of the ways that, the earth produces food for us, right?
That's some of the stuff I wanted to talk. We'll talk about next time. Okay. But I wanted to bring up lab created meats. So I think that's a huge sustainable.
It's kind of cool.
Type of food. It's amazing. Yeah. One sample from an animal can feed people forever.
Yeah.
And then also, I wanted to talk about the idea of what is nature, because it frustrates me when people start talking about AI and stuff and saying it's not natural or it's not nature. Cool. Or like, to me, software is nature. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like computers, everything in this room is nature.
I think we'd say because I have a class I teach. I taught it last semester. It's biomimetics and biomaterials. And the first thing we have about what is a biomaterial, what is a natural material, what is a non-natural material. And it's funny how the class debated this sort of the same sort of argument. I argue that a lot of software is biomimetic in the sense that we're using a series of things. Yeah. And we're just mimicking what we have. These orders that we're creating in an electronic device are simply creating kind of a series of prompts that enable this device somehow, and I don't know how they work, so don't hold me to this, to do what we want it to do. And so I would say, everything we do is natural. Yeah. I think this artificial aspect is making the distinction whether it's produced from a cell.
Yeah,
but for us, it's kind of like it's kind of produced from a cell.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't say the anthill is not natural because the ants made it.
Yeah,
Right.
Or if the anthill made it out of like polystyrene, like some sort of sand that was like made out of plastic, they could still do it.
Well, look at spiders.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
they can make something. That'd be good. I'd be welcome to come back and talk, because
That'll be a fun
because the
conversation.
biomaterials and stuff and natural world, that's a big debate that I want the students to think about. If you take, like protein, collagen from a chicken bone and make something with it, is that a biomaterial? And I had a student argue, no, it's not, because you took collagen, Jello, and made something from it.
Can't we start looking at
But
everything? Shouldn't we stop looking at things as material and just as data, just as information, and find
I think
ways
if we
to
were to
combine the information?
ascribe the information, and put the information in context of what it actually is. So one of the information is, if it is a material, it would have a set of properties, a set of capabilities that one used in certain ways. But yeah, I think this idea of information is, like I said, when they just simply talk about information, they were talking about black holes and information. I think there was a conversation how, like, as the black hole fills up with too much information, it can literally fill up with too much information.
Well, it's Hawking radiation. It escapes.
Yeah. And then it's going to escape.
I wonder if we are in a black hole, the universe expanding faster than the speed of light, maybe that's just Hawking radiation.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the universe escaping.
It's just an artifact of our own little crappy black hole that we're filling with YouTube videos and TikTok.
Who knows? Yeah.
I'm glad to be a contributor.
If we keep breaking it, we can get out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on again,
Excellent.
Dennis. And
Well, thank you.
How can people? Do you want anybody to follow you on social media or anything?
I don't know. I have an Instagram account with a lot of people, but I think most of them are robots, and so.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah. I think I'm like the king of the robot Instagram, because I post something, I get anywhere from 30 to maybe 60 likes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of robots on there, and then you get like these DMs from robot people asking you. I think I have people ask me to sell stuff, like influencer stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I got some free things. And I'm not selling. Here's some sunglasses I got, or a backpack, and so. But cool. Most of it was from dog bandanas.
Oh,
I could have gotten my dog a bandana, but I just didn't follow up. I was like, he's not getting a bandana.
That's funny. What is your Instagram?
It's just
handle.
I think it's just Dennis.
We'll throw it on the. We'll throw it in the lower thirds.
That's true. We can do that.
Yeah, I think it's. And I'll put it. I always put a link. I put a link last time.
Okay.
And so a lot of people, like all my students, just love the podcast. They're like, they're like, you're so calm and relaxed. It's like, well, that's why you take the courses and you just don't give a shit.
Using those soft skills.
These are soft skills, guys. They call it freestyling, because at the end of the semester, when students graduate, you have to go down and you say something about it. And inevitably at these award ceremonies, I always forget to write something else. I see the other faculty have these pages, like they presented at this meeting, they wrote this paper, they're so brilliant. I'm like, oh shit, I don't have anything to say nice about my students. So I go down and just make stuff up. Like, you did so good. So my student Theo, who's graduated, like, I'm gonna learn to freestyle like you. Like, yeah, Theo, you can. I've seen you freestyle. It's not that good.
Well, the ones that are working hard, and they know who they are.
Yeah.
The ones that put in the work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's working his ass off. He just it's all good. It's all good. But it's actually kind of fun. So yeah, I'll I think it's just Dennis Lajeunesse. I don't think there's an underscore or anything.
We'll tag it on the video.
Yeah.
And well, again, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to the next time. And
yeah, for sure.
Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.